You're on.
All right. So a little pre-military history was
Let's start
I
with your
grew up
name,
in
Cal.
Calvin Melgard. I just go by Cal, and I was born and raised in Warren, Minnesota, and I lived there all my whole life until I joined the Navy, and from there on, the world was my home basically. So, but a little pre-military history was that. I wanted to get out of Warren really bad. So the small town didn't agree with me. And I worked in a gas station with a fellow serviceman, Rick Solberg. And so we worked at the Mobile 101 station on the corner of Johnson and 75 in Warren. And for months we talked about, well, let's join the Navy. Let's join the Navy. And at that time, you could join the Navy with somebody if you wanted to, I think it was called the Cache program, where you could pre-enlist and spend up to 5 or 6 months prior to active duty or boot camp, basically. And then, and so that's what we decided to do. So in 1970, we went to Thief River Falls to the recruiting station and joined the Navy. And so, and with recruit training starting on the 24th of November of that same year in 1970. So, why we chose the Navy is because at the time, the mail carrier, John Carlson was in the Navy, and my Uncle Bob was in the Navy, and everybody talked about how cheap beer was and that type of stuff. So it just sounded like a good idea. And we were nowhere near being called up number-wise for the draft. I think I was in the 300s or something like that. So I had no worries about going to Vietnam at that time. And I felt, where the war or whatever that was called at the time was well worth it. I mean, it was something that we were trying to do to prevent the expansion of communism and so on and so forth. So. And it wasn't until later that I learned that wasn't really so. It was kind of like the big military and the economic boom that it brought to the States as far as the engine, the manufacturing and so on and so forth. So, but so that's a little bit about the pre-military history that I have. So it was just something to get out of town. Try to make something myself, get an occupation that I could probably like. I really liked aviation at that time. Even before I went in and got my billet rating, I liked aviation. So it was just fortunate that when I got my billet rating in the service, I was rated out as an aviation in the mechanics and so on and so forth. So
Cal,
there's so many different billets. Yeah.
Cal, where did you enlist at?
I enlisted in Thief River Falls, Minnesota.
Okay.
That's where the recruiting station was, yeah. And then the nearest, Grand Forks was another one, but we went to Thief River for some reason. So, and the day that we took the bus out of Warren in November and went down to Fargo, and then from Fargo we got on I don't know what kind of transport it was, but it wasn't military. I think it was a civilian transport, and they flew us out to San Diego. So, and that's where I did my recruit training, was San Diego, and it was a pretty good size training center. And we got San Diego because they said everybody that lived west of the Mississippi at that time went to San Diego, and everybody east of the Mississippi either went to Great Lakes or I think Orlando. And so we got the best of both worlds. We went out to California.
Kind of lucked out.
So it was nice. Yeah, definitely nice. So processing was quite an experience. So it's something that, being a high school, being out of high school and being kind of cocky and all this other stuff, you get in there and it's a different world. So when they processed us, we got it. Yeah, we got in late that evening. So when they processed us, it was really late, and they had us standing at attention, and they were just yelling at us, and they were. I mean, it was one thing after another, just putting the fear of God into us. And it got to the point where some guys would be standing and file, saying, "I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom." And you could, pee your pants, and a lot of them did, I guess. So, but I do remember in the wee hours of the morning, we were able to hit. It was like an open corridor, like a large barracks, and we were able to get into our rack to get a couple hours sleep before they got us up the next morning. And they came in and got us up. I think it was 0500 or something like that, and processed us that whole week. We were getting haircuts, and we were getting our sea bags loaded up, and we were getting inoculated for all sorts of things, and it was just one thing after another. It's the weirdest thing, though. We were getting our haircuts. We all were different looking. Everybody was different looking. And when you came out of that barbershop, everybody looked the same. So right then and there, right, they indoctrinated us to be a team, and that's kind of the whole gist of the processing, I guess. So anyway, we learned all sorts of things about shipboard life, how to tie knots, how to do all sorts of stuff. We learned about the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and we spent my recruit training went from November 24th of November in 1970 to February 24th of 1971. So we had 3 months. It was a long training process, and I guess now it's not as long, but it seemed like forever. And the thing I remember out of boot camp, other than the fact that what we learned, was that during the Super Bowl, we played Kansas City and lost. And then the other one was George Harrison came out with My Sweet Lord. And so every time that song comes on, I remember boot camp to this day.
Flashback.
And that's what, yeah. So it's just amazing.
So Cal, walk me through a day of boot camp. Walk me through a normal day of boot camp.
Well, if you didn't have to, or you would stand fire watches in the barracks. A normal day would be to get up, you make your rack, then you shit, shower, and shave, and get ready for formation, and you stand at the end of your bunk. We had bunk beds, so there's somebody above, and I think I had the upper bunk. So we would stand by our sea chest. There was a sea chest at the foot of the bed, and they would come in and they would look at your locker, which was an open cubicle type of locker, and all your clothing had to be perfectly rolled or folded, and shoes had to be spit shine. And that was like almost from day one when they formed us in the company. There was like 80 of us, I think, and our company was 447, and our instructor was a machinist. He was a chief senior machinist mate, and his name was Nelson. So
these barracks, were they wooden barracks? Is that way?
Nope. These were built. These were built specifically for World War II, and they were built to train the people during the servicemen during World War II. So the barracks we were in were concrete. Thing about the government, they had lots of money to build stuff, and when they built it really well. So they were made out of concrete. I do remember that they had 8x8 floor tile, asbestos. It was VCT, but it was asbestos floor tile and stuff like that. And on the floors. At that time we had bulkheads, which were the walls. We had the deck, which was the floor, and we had the overhead, which was the ceiling. So everything was basically Navy terminology. So when we woke up in the morning, made our beds, shit, showered, and shaved, got back, and got dressed and then stood at attention for inspection. And out of the 80 people there, we were divided up into like platoons. And I remember Rick Solberg was the platoon leader for his platoon. And because he was a big guy.
Yes.
And and we had from all walks of life. We had Filipinos, we had Hispanics, we even had a Japanese guy that was there. The demographics were just everybody.
Pretty diverse.
And yeah, we had a very diverse company, and as were the other places. But there was probably about 24 barracks on the. There's an old side and a new side, so there's about a couple dozen barracks on either side that I can remember, and we were next to the Marine Corps. Our barracks was next to the Marine Corps Training Center across the bay, or it was a channel basically. And there was a golf course there for the Marines, so on and so forth. But there, about 4 a.m, we could hear them getting up, so we got an extra hour's sleep. So it worked out. After inspection, we would go down and have breakfast. We get in line, and everybody get into platoon. Then we'd march down there, and they would gig us if we didn't do it correctly. So, and if they gigged us, they would stop everybody, and then we'd all have to do calisthenics or something like that. So if one guy screwed up, we all screwed up. And we'd go down and have breakfast. We got out. We had to take our cover off, which was our hat. And then they would send us in platoons, and we would march into the chow line, and they would serve us, and we'd go sit down. And before we'd all stand, and before we could sit, we all had to be in our platoon at the table. And then we would sit, eat, then get up, put our trays away, and then go back out and fall in again. And then so that after the breakfast, we'd have training, we'd have schoolwork, we would do physical or PT, all sorts of things. So whatever it took to get us through, to get us into training is pretty much what boot camp was about. So that whole...
So Cal, what was the food like?
Oh gosh, I swear to God, it was the best food ever.
That's what I've heard about the Navy.
I talked to a lot of military guys from different branches of service. Oh, our food is... I said, you know what? When I was on the ship, on the Kennedy, we had steak and lobster. No, that's no lie. Of course, then, when you're out deployed a long time, rations run out. So they would bring a supply ship in, like Seattle was a great big supply ship, and they would bring supplies in back for. But as you're getting towards the end of the rationing, I'm jumping ahead, but if you're getting towards it, the first thing that ran out was milk. Then so you had to drink bug juice, which was Kool-Aid. But then, so you learned to use bug juice on your cereal if you had that. But I tell you what, Keith, the food was fantastic. It was just the best ever. And
that's what I heard about the Navy. They had good food.
Oh, they had great food. And then you also had that while you were still in boot camp, in training. One of the things in training was that you had to go work in the kitchen. So you had to work in a KP situation where I was working in the scullery, which is the area where you dishwash and stuff. So that's what I did when I had I think it was like a week. And so I learned you could use hot sauce to clean copper pipe. It would shine like crazy. So, and it was a tapatio, not tapatillos. It was, what's that stuff that they make in New Orleans that's kind of garbage? I can't think of it now. Well, anyway, hot sauce. Anyway, so we all had different types of duties, and that was one of the I guess temporary duties that we would have while we were in training. So the food was great. The camaraderie we had, with the diverse people that were with us, the camaraderie was just perfect. I mean, we all looked out for each other. We had one guy that was from West Virginia, And how he got out there is beyond me. But he was able to get into San Diego and never owned a pair of shoes in his life. Never knew what a toothbrush was. And we actually had what they call as a blanket party. The chief chief senior came in and said, "Hey, listen, this guy isn't conforming and so on. He's tearing you guys down." Well, he said it in such a way. He said, "But you guys need to make sure that he complies with your company and your company standards." So we had a blanket party, and it wasn't where we beat him up or anything like that. We just took him in and we took a scrub brush and we scrubbed the hell out of him. And he was able to get a brand new pair of teeth.
Oh, that's a different blanket party. I've never heard of a cleaning blanket.
Well, some of the ones is you inflict a lot of pain on somebody. And
right.
We never resort to that, but I've heard of those in different companies where they had guys that are just total screw-ups, and that's how they took care of them. We never lost. I don't think we lost. We lost one person in our company because he got sick, so he got moved back a couple of weeks, and he graduated a couple of weeks after we did. So, but never lost anybody to illness or anything like that. So, typically in the afternoon after you're done with your stuff and you've had your lunch and before a dinner, you have to wash your clothes. So, and their wash clothes. So their clothes washer was a long concrete basin with sides that were probably about 6 inches high. And they had hose bib type faucets on it. And you would have your own station. You had a bar soap and you had a scrub brush. And you would wash your clothes that way. So we would wash our whites, T-shirts. And believe me, during inspection, they would go like this. And then they would look at your T-shirt at this little rib here. And if there's any dirt on it, you got gigged. And if you got gigged, the whole company had to do theirs. So nobody hardly ever. I think there's every once in a while, there's always something, a little bit of dirt or something that had there. And they will also check you with a credit card, not a credit card, but something that was stiff like a credit card, because they didn't have credit cards that I can remember, but that if you shaved correctly. And we had some guys. We had one guy named Roscoe, and he could shave, and he had a 5 o'clock shadow about 5 minutes later. It was tough on him. So he got, and then we had another gentleman who was a black guy from New Mexico, I think he was from, and he had a rash. So he got a medical excuse not to have to shave. He's the only guy in our company that had a beard. So, but there was all sorts of things. I knew a guy named Phil Collins, and later on, he called me up after, this is in the mid-70s, well, I think it was 71, 72, he called me up and he goes, "Hey, I'm in a group called Genesis," and I said it was BS because I know who Phil Collins was, because he wasn't English, that's for sure. And so, but we had just a really good crew for our company. So I really enjoyed it. It was a structured life, and if you screwed up, you knew you were going to take everybody with you, and so you tried not to screw up. And,
so Cal, did you have a graduation?
Yes, we did, and we got beautiful weather. None of my relatives made it out to San Diego during graduation, so because it was just too far to go. And but we had a great graduation. It was nice to see civilians in the grandstands and stuff like that, but it was just a real proud moment, And then we got our marching orders to go to our next duty station.
So what's your rank now?
I went to,
What's your rank now? What do you rank?
I was an aviation apprentice.
So is that a E2,
that's
E3?
An AA. It's an E2.
Okay.
And then somehow or another, as soon as I made it to my next duty station, which was an A school that they taught you your training stuff, I became an aviation AN, which is an E3. E3, yeah.
Yeah, you guys have so many nomenclatures that it's hard to keep up with. You guys. I need a dictionary just to follow you guys.
Yeah, so I was an E2 because I had prior reserve. I had 5 months prior reserve, so I came in as an E2, not as an E1.
All right.
And so did Rick. So we had black stripes. So, but once we got our billet designation, our black stripes turned to green stripes, which meant aviation. So I had 2 green stripes, and it was just, I don't know, when you think back on it, I said, wow, what a neat thing, to have that. And then when I made it to Memphis and finished my schooling and stuff there in the aviation mechanic field, I became an AN, which was an E3.
Is Rick still with you when you go to Memphis?
Rick he stayed a Black Shoe, I think. So there was Airedales, which was the aviation branch, and then there was Black Shoes, which ships company. So, or the Uber drivers. I got a friend of my brother's wife's nephew is a Marine. And so every time, and I always say, we have our birthday, and the Navy has their birthday, and the Marines have their birthday about a month later. And so every time I send him a message, say, happy birthday from your Uber driver. So,
because that's what your good Navy is taxi driver for the Marines, right?
Well, virtually, we had 2 Marines. There was a complement of Marines. The Marines kept the business. They worked with the Master of Arms of the Navy, which was the law enforcement, basically. And so there's always a complement of Marines on the carrier. And plus, the Kennedy, I was on the John F. Kennedy, and for just about my whole sea duty until the squadron moved out to California to go into the F-14s. So I was too short to do that. So my short timers calendar didn't allow that. And so, but Kennedy was the flagship for the Admiral. And
get a little ahead of. So, let's go back to your B school. How did that go?
Oh, okay. Huh?
How did that go? Your B school training?
My A school. Okay, so A school, they brought you. I went into A school in March of '71, and I had a short leave where I came home, and then I flew out of, I think, Grand Forks, and then I flew into Memphis, and that's where the A school was Millington, Tennessee, which was on the border of West Memphis and West Memphis, Arkansas, I think, was or something, I can't remember. But it was the border of Arkansas and Tennessee.
That's where my daughter is right now.
Oh, okay. So Millington was a large training base for secondary. We were deployed there to do our secondary training, and it was also the headquarters for a lot of the military records that were kept in the Navy.
Still is.
And so it was a fairly large base. I love Memphis. Memphis was great. And the thing that struck me outside of school, the thing that struck me about Tennessee was, when you grow up in Minnesota, you drive on gravel roads or dirt, right? A farm road is a freeway. Well, their farm roads were all paved, every last one of them. They had paved secondary roads, highways, and they had paved county roads, and everything was paved. And I just thought that was the greatest in the world. I said, wow, you never get dirty down here. And, when I grew up, go out to Warren Drive-In, it was all muddy during the rainstorms and stuff like that. When you go to a drive-in down in Memphis, Tennessee, meeting will end? Not now. Okay. And so their drive-ins had paved lots and stuff like that. So it was kind of a neat thing. So anyway, but I took my aviation hydraulics, pneumatics, and structural mechanics training in Memphis and or in Millington, and then from there I was transferred to Oceana, NAS Oceana, which is the largest fighter base on the East Coast. And so there I went into training to learn to be a plane captain.
Who?
And so there's a plane captain.
Okay.
So a plane captain, the squadron, at the time the Navy had, attack aircraft. I went to a fighter squadron which had the McDonnell Douglas F-4s. And so they taught us how to handle the F-4, as far as how to service it, do all sorts of things, how to take care of it, what the flight control surfaces did, and how you had to transmit all that information to ask a pilot to give you those responses by hand signals. So we learned all these hand signals and so on and so forth. And I finished a plane captain school. I think that was 9 weeks. And at the time, they sent me to my permanent base, which was on the same base, just a couple hangars down, which was Fighter Squadron 32, which is a fixed-wing aircraft for fighting. And it was the F-4B aircraft, which was it was built in the 60s. But it was all I can do to describe. It was a rocket ship with wings. That's all I can describe it. It was like a brick that could move through the air, and it could move through the air at over Mach 2. So it was just a badass aircraft. And so I went into the squadron, I think it was in September of 71, and went to the line division, which was part of the plane captains. So the plane captains were there. And because of my mechanical aptitude in my mechanical testing in A school, I became a troubleshooter. So what that meant was that I was the guy that would go through and check out all the systems on the aircraft before they were launched, while they were on the flight deck. So it was a flight deck type of job, and you would check, make sure all the air was up, that there was hydraulic fluid, that all the hatches were buttoned, all the access panels were buttoned down, the tires looked good, and it was that kind of stuff there. And if you needed servicing, they had these little jennies and stuff that you would carry around, and you would put air into the systems or hydraulic fluid. Each fail-safe system I learned how to do pumps and stuff like that when I was in school. So each one of these pumps and stuff, and hydraulic cylinders and so on and so forth that operated the flight control panels or surfaces, had two other backups. So if they were hydraulically actuated, they could also be actuated by air or by electricity.
So you're on the carrier now, right?
Pardon me?
You're on the carrier now?
Oh, yeah. Well, we did our first deployment, when was it? It was in December of 71. And so I was in the squadron I went to the squadron in September. And then we deployed again. Like I said, we deployed in December. So I had very little of the flight line stuff done on the beach, except for just getting acclimated to the squadron. We were packing up all our gear so we could ship it out to the boat. The carrier was at Pier 12 in Norfolk, which is about 20 miles away. And so we would pack up our gear, and we would put it on helicopters or on flatbed trucks or so on and so forth. And then they would ship it out to the carrier, and then they would pelletize it and then put it back on the flight deck. And then from there, you would take it down to your shop. I mean, each shop was like that. So there's aviation, electronics, aviation, jet mechanics, AOs for ordnance. I mean, all sorts of, whatever you can think of, they had it. And then also the ship had an AMD department, which is Aviation Maintenance Department, which is part of the ship's company. that ran the stores and had all this other stuff for aircraft. You know, if you needed an actuator, they would, you know, you could go up there and order it. And God, just the waste. I can't believe all that money. Yeah, just amazing. So, but we deployed in December. We left Norfolk in '71. And immediately, we were doing care quals and stuff like that at the same time. So from September to December, we were doing the carrier qualifications, and we had a detachment on the beach, and we had a detachment on the carrier. And so the carrier quals were that the pilots would have to qualify to land on the ship, and that means catching one of 4 arresting gear and launching off steam catapults. So, and if they didn't, they were bogeyed off and they wouldn't be able to make the cruise. So there's a lot of damage done to aircraft at that time. So, you don't want to miss a carrier or arresting gear. So a lot of these guys would come in and, they'd have the ball, and then when they were coming into land, they would just cut their power and just drop on the deck just like that. So, and then, so you'd have a tire blow, or you'd have a strut would blow a seal or something of that nature, and so we had to repair that at the same time. As a troubleshooter, I had to assess and then give that assessment to the shop, which is down on the hangar bay, which is 3 decks down. And so they would. So that's what I did. I did that for 13 months. I was a troubleshooter. So I was on the carrier on the flight deck for 13 months.
What's your rank now?
Which was, I took my test in 72, in July of 72. So I was still an I was still an E3.
Okay.
Yeah, and I took my E4 test in July of 72, and passed that. So I became an E4. So, and then at the same time, when I passed that, I became the petty officer, the publications petty officer for the aircraft. So that meant I had to, after my 12 on, 12 off, we had 12 on, 12 off. You do your watches in your off time, and you do your publications in your off time, and so on and so forth. So I did publications, and I got outstanding marks in that, which was good. So I was always good about keeping the books, and so I felt really good about that. I got accommodations for that kind of stuff, and I was a good mechanic too. So after the 13 months on the flight deck, we got back. When did we get back? I think we got.
Can I ask you what the billets were like? What sleeping arrangements?
Oh. I was in the line division, we had most of the compartments were underneath the flight deck. So the vast majority were. So between you and the overhead was a thick piece of metal, which is the flight deck. And so the line division had their compartment. We had 30 guys in our line division. There was 12 aircraft. Each aircraft had 2 bodies attached to it, a day body and a night body. And so that was 24. And there was 2 of us in troubleshooting that would, we were like 24/7. So Sid and I, Victor Sidola, he taught me my troubleshooting duties and stuff. So Victor and I took care of took care of all the flight ops. Every time there was flight ops, we had to be on deck.
So how long were your shifts?
12 on, 12 off. So
for the whole time you're at sea?
Yeah, it was 7 to 7. That's what it was. So, and like I said, you did your watches. You had to perform a watch, which was 4 hours, and that was, I think, well,